Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. We are a country that stands united in our effort to defeat a pandemic, to save lives, and to help each other make it to a better day. But yesterday, we were jolted from that common cause by the senseless violence and tragedy in Nova Scotia. A gunman claimed the lives of at least 18 people. Among them, a woman in uniform, whose job it is to protect lives even if it endangers her own, Constable Heidi Stevenson of the RCMP. Constable Stevenson died protecting others. She was answering the call of duty, something she had done every day when she went to work for 23 years. This happened in small towns. Portapique, Truro, Milford, and Enfield are places where people have deep roots, places where people know their neighbors and look out for one another. There, everyone knows a Mountie because they're everything from police officers to social workers to teen counselors. Now these communities are in mourning, and Canada is in mourning with them. To the grandparent who lost a child, to the children who lost a parent, to the neighbor who lost a friend, we are so sorry for your loss. Such a tragedy should have never occurred. Violence of any kind has no place in Canada. We stand with you and we grieve with you, and you can count on our government's full support during this incredibly painful time.
Yesterday, at least 18 people died following a shooting in Nova Scotia, throwing families and their loved ones with the sense of loss. To grandparents who lost a child, to neighbors who lost friends, to parents who lost loved ones, our thoughts and thoughts of all Canadians are with you. Such a tragedy should never have happened. Violence has no place in our country. We share your loss, and we are wholeheartedly with you through these very painful moments.
I also want to wish a full and speedy recovery to all those injured, including another RCMP officer. Canada is a vast and sweeping country filled with long stretches of lonely roads. With unwavering courage and compassion, our Royal Canadian Mounted Police patrol these roads to keep us safe, as they have for over 100 years. I know that from coast to coast to coast, the women and men who wear the red serge in service to Canada are grieving deeply the loss of one of their own and one of our best. This tragedy is a painful reminder of the risks all of our first responders take to keep us safe, of the sacrifices they make every single day to protect our communities. Paramedics, doctors, nurses, firefighters, and police officers, they're always here for us. They've been stepping up through the pandemic, and yesterday in Nova Scotia, they showed that bravery. I want to take a moment to thank them all for their professionalism and their courage. Many of you are already working overtime because of this pandemic. Our communities need you now more than ever, and I know that can weigh on you at times. These are exceptional circumstances, yet you did what you always do. You ran towards danger, without pause, without hesitation. You put your life on the line on behalf of all Canadians. Thank you for your service.
I will take a minute to thank all the first responders for their courage and professionalism. You already work very hard these days due to the pandemic. More than ever, we need you. And sometimes that responsibility is a heavy one to carry. In spite of exceptional circumstances, you did what you always do. You did not hesitate to risk your life to save others. So from all Canadians, thank you for your service.
This day is made all the more difficult because of the precious lives lost and the senseless act of one person. Just how could this happen? We may never know why. But we do know this. No one man's action can build a wall between us and a better day, no matter how evil, how thoughtless, or how destructive. Canadians are kind and generous. We are there for each other and we look out for one another. As families grieve the loss of a loved one, all Canadians are standing with them. The pandemic will prevent us from mourning together in person, but a vigil will be held virtually to celebrate the lives of the victims at 7 p.m. on Friday through the Facebook group Colchester Supporting Our Community. As we learn more about what happened yesterday, it's important that we come together to support communities. In the hours since the tragedy, I've spoken with Premier McNeil, RCMP Commissioner Lucky, Minister Blair, and many Nova Scotians, including our Nova Scotia caucus. We will continue to work together to see this through. I know that people have a lot of questions. This is an ongoing investigation, but I can assure you that the RCMP and local authorities will keep you updated. I want to ask the media to avoid mentioning the name and showing the picture of the person involved. Do not give him the gift of infamy. Let us instead focus all our intention and attention on the lives we lost and the families and friends who grieve.
Even if the pandemic prevents us from mourning together in person, a virtual vigil will happen at 7 p.m. on the Facebook page Colchester Supporting Our Community. It will be a chance for us to celebrate the victims' lives and to be there for their families and loved ones. I hope that many of you will join us. Whereas we're still trying to understand what happened yesterday, we have to be there for one another. Since that tragedy, I have spoken with Premier McNeil, the RC MP Commissioner Brenda Lackey, and Bill Blair from Public Safety, as well as our Nova Scotian caucus, amongst others. We will continue working together on that file. I know that people have questions. The investigation is still ongoing, but I can assure you that the RCMP and the local authorities will keep you informed of the latest developments.
I would also ask the media to not use the names or the photos of the perpetrator of this terrible act. Please don't do that for him. We should really focus on the victims and their loved ones as well.
I want to close today by addressing all the kids in Nova Scotia and right across the country. I know the world can seem like a mean and ugly place right now, but there's a whole lot of good in the world too. You'll see it in your neighbors and in Canadians in the days and weeks and months ahead. This is a difficult time, and it can be a scary time too. But we're here for you, and we're going to get through this together. I promise.
Merci. On va commencer la conférence de presse avec le téléphone aujourd'hui. Modérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Laura Osmond, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Mr. Prime Minister, wanted to ask you, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer today accused you of being inflexible in your negotiations about the number of in-person sittings in Parliament. I was wondering if there's any room for a compromise, 2 sittings per week, for example, given that moving forward may be preferable to no deal at all.
Look, I don't want to get into arguments with anyone today. We are working together amongst all parties to try and figure out a way to both protect and uphold our democracy, to ensure that there is proper accountability, while at the same time doing that responsibly. And I am hopeful that we're going to be able to come to an appropriate arrangement.
Follow-up question.
I was wondering if we could have an accounting of all of the ways that the opposition has been kept informed of the ongoing crisis and the government's actions outside of the House to date.
As I said, we have been engaged with all parties over the course of this pandemic. There have been many good ideas brought forward by business leaders, by community groups, by individual Canadians, but also by MPs from all parties who've heard from citizens in their communities what's needed to be done to help. This has been an unprecedented effort across government to try and make sure that we are giving Canadians the help they need to get through this difficult time, and we will continue to do that.
Merci. Prochaine question. Opérateur.
Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Kate Bolongaro, Bloomberg, line open.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. I have a question for you regarding navigating Canada through this crisis. Obviously, you're leading this G7 country through this pandemic, and you've also been personally impacted by this. So I'm wondering, how would you say that this pandemic has impacted your governing style as a leader and your perception of your role as our Prime Minister?
I think one of the things that we've seen right across the country is how Canadians have pulled together through this difficult time, and that's something that we've always done. We make sure we're there for each other when we encounter difficulties. And right across the country, whether it's premiers, whether it's municipal leaders, whether it's community groups or individual Canadians, we've seen Canadians step up for each other. And the privilege of being able to serve Canadians through this difficult time is really quite something when you see just how Canadians are resolute in their desire to support each other through this. Obviously, the capacity to work across all orders of government, work together as a country, is what is keeping us on a good path through this. There are too many tragedies to name going on as people lose loved ones right across the country. But at the same time, we know that what we are doing is helping prevent further tragedies, and we're going to continue to do that.
On a follow-up, Kate.
And how would you describe your strategy? What has it been in terms of inside the PMO office to getting us through these tough times? And how would you assess your own performance on that?
Our focus every step of the way has been listening to the best advice of experts and scientists on what we need to do to keep Canadians safe in this, and to ensure that everything we're doing is giving Canadians the comfort and confidence that we're all in this together and that we are going to be there for each other. I think that has been key to making sure that people are able to self-isolate, are able to take the difficult measures necessary to get us through this pandemic, is to know that as a country, as systems, as governments, we're there for each other, and making sure that Canadians feel that support and know that we're going to get through this together has been key in making us able to get through this together.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Next question.
Prochaine question,
My next question, Marie Vastel from Le Devoir. You have the floor. Hello, Mr. Trudeau. Well, I understand that you don't really want to talk about Parliament perhaps too much today, but the fact is that it's sitting as we speak. So I want to talk to you about that and ask you a question about Parliament. Could you tell us about what ordinary Canadians think about what's happening in Ottawa? From their homes, people are at home rather, and have been for more than 2 months now. They're in isolation. They're seeing what's going on in Nova Scotia with the pandemic as well. And Parliament is not able to actually sit because parties are unable to come to an agreement. What do you think Canadians think of what's happening? Well, I think that Canadians understand that it's important, not despite of the crisis, but because of the crisis, that we continue to advocate for our institutions, that we continue to have Parliament sit, but we have to do that in a responsible fashion. I think Canadians understand that, and it's important to continue with the measures that we've taken to help people across the country. What we're doing is putting forward possible ways of working in a responsible, constructive fashion. Most of the opposition parties rather agree with that approach, and I think our discussions will continue today to actually set out a roadmap so that we're able to actually protect our democratic institutions, but in a responsible way as well. Well, all right. There are some parties, well, one specific party, that's accused the Conservatives of taking Parliament hostage. I'd like to hear you tell us what you think about that description of the current situation. I'd also like to hear what you think about compromise, negotiation with the other parties, because there is one party that's demanding 3 in-person sittings a week, rather. And you don't seem to agree with that. You're saying that you wanted to make sure that social distancing can be maintained, and to do that, you think that there should only be one actual in-person sitting. Shouldn't you just agree with the Conservatives so that Parliament can sit? Well, I don't want to get into that squabbling. I don't think that's what Canadians really want, or what they expect from us. But Canadians want to know that we're doing what we have to do to protect our institutions, to make sure that our democracy continues to exist and flourish in this difficult time, and to make sure that there is accountability and questions are asked and answers are given. I'm very confident that today we will come to an agreement on an approach which will both ensure the continuity of our parliamentary institutions during this tough time, but in a responsible fashion at the same time. Thank you very much. Last question on the line.
Thank you. Merci.
Next question, Louis Samuel Perron from La Presse. Over to you. Hello, Prime Minister. Your government, will it be tabling legislation to actually ensure stricter gun control in the wake of what happened in Nova Scotia? Well, there are many questions about what happened. There's an investigation underway about what actually happened in Nova Scotia, and I don't want to speculate on that yet. But I would like to say that we made clear commitments on stricter gun control. And just before this pandemic, we were about to table legislation to ban assault rifles from Canada and Canada's streets. We'll be picking up where we left off as soon as we have the opportunity to do so in the House of Commons once we've got through COVID-19. A follow-up question. Well, in Quebec this morning, construction workers returned to work sites, residential construction sites. Does your government support that measure in Quebec, and are you advocating for it to be replicated elsewhere in the country? Well, I think it's important the various jurisdictions make their own decisions in their own jurisdiction. It's up to each region, each province, territory to assess what can be done and when. We're trying to coordinate based on shared principles, but provinces will take action at different times. But I think it's essential that no matter what decisions are made, the health and safety of workers and Canadians in general must be protected to stop the spread of COVID-19. That has to be the priority in any loosening of the lockdown conditions.
Given what we know about the shooting in Nova Scotia, could that have prevented these crimes? And if not, would you consider even tighter gun control measures?
As we know, this is very much an ongoing investigation that's in its early stages in Nova Scotia right now, so I don't want to jump to conclusions or make characterizations about what happened until we get a full accounting from the authorities. But in regards to gun control, we took very serious commitments in the election campaign and have moved forward and are moving forward on them to ensure that we're strengthening gun control in this country. I can say that we were on the verge of introducing legislation to ban assault-style weapons across this country. It was interrupted when the pandemic caused Parliament to be suspended. but we have every intention of moving forward on that measure and potentially other measures when the Parliament returns.
Would you approve of relaxing some physical distancing measures to allow the people in Nova Scotia to bury their loved ones properly?
I think that's a reflection that communities, that the province, and that all of us are going to have. We understand how incredibly painful it is for families who've lost loved ones in Nova Scotia this past day, to imagine that they're not going to be able to see them off together as a community. But at the same time, there are thousands and thousands of Canadians across this country who've lost loved ones to COVID-19 over the past days, and others who've lost family members to cancer and to other causes, who haven't been able to gather, to mourn, to grieve, to attend funerals. This is something that we are dealing with right now that is heartbreak on top of other heartbreaks. And I know that everyone will be looking for ways to demonstrate their solidarity without putting further at risk communities, first responders, our health professionals, and our seniors. Okay.
Well, I recognize that there are people who have lost loved ones over the past few days in Nova Scotia. But there are also people who have lost members of their families, friends, parents over the past few weeks to COVID-19. And they too have not been able to hold funerals to say goodbye to their loved ones together. Now, this is a situation which is tough, which is made even worse in times of loss and mourning. We must continue to be there for each other in tragic times, but at the same time we must make sure that we're not creating greater risk and greater danger for our loved ones, for our neighbours, and for first responders and healthcare professionals as well. We need to do everything in our power to keep people safe and healthy during this pandemic.
Global News. Prime Minister, was the Nova Scotia shooter on the federal government's radar? Were any federal agencies watching him?
There are many questions that people are asking about what happened and how it happened, and that investigation is ongoing, and I can assure everyone that the RCMP will be sharing details as they can, as they choose in the coming days. And there will be many opportunities to talk more about these things once we have a clearer idea of the facts.
What did you think when you learned about the degree of planning and impersonation in this terrible crime? Does it concern you that someone could create such a good fake?
I think as we learn more about this, we'll have to ask ourselves many questions about how it happened and if and what we can do to keep communities safer in the future. But my first thoughts when I heard of this tragedy yesterday and saw the numbers climb in terms of victims, my first thought was for Nova Scotians who, for the most part, know each other so much. They are such a connected group that I know that the vast majority of Nova Scotians will have a direct link with one or more of the many victims. And the entire province and the entire country is grieving right now as we come to grips with something that is absolutely unimaginable.
Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. Prime Minister, as we're talking about the national tragedy in Nova Scotia and Canadians living under strict public health guidelines across the country, how appropriate is it for this ongoing battle over procedural matters to bring back Parliament? Why can't your government reach a deal on this?
I'm very hopeful that over the course of the day, Canadians will see parliamentarians coming together to demonstrate that our democracy is strong, that our institutions need to function, including during difficult times. Indeed, because of the difficult time we're going through, but that we can do so in a responsible way. As I've said, there is agreement amongst most of the parties in the House of Commons, and I hope to see by the end of this day that we're all in a place where we can both have our parliamentary institutions functioning, but doing so in a responsible way, given the context we're in. J'espère.
I hope that we'll end up at the end of today with a reasonable way of making sure that, yes, Parliament and the democracy is operating, not in spite of the pandemic, but because of the pandemic. But we shall see. We are in a situation where we have agreement from most parliamentarians. We hope we will find the best way to continue sitting in a responsible way given the circumstances.
As a follow-up, what responsibility does your government take for not having this deal in place?
I think it's all of our collective responsibility to do the best we can through this difficult situation. It is really important for me that we continue to uphold our democracy, our democratic principles, the principles of accountability, the ability to move forward with new legislation to help Canadians. That really matters. But it really matters that we do so responsibly. I'm pleased that we have agreement amongst most parties. And I'm hopeful that by the end of the day today, we'll have a clear path forward that will both defend our institutions and appreciate the context that we're in right now.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau, Philippe Vincent Foisy de Radio-Canada. Je comprends qu'il y a des
Question
questions.
from Radio-Canada. I understand that there are some questions that will come up for many days more given this investigation in Nova Scotia. I won't ask you the question specifically about Nova Scotia, but for Canada in general. How come that in 2020 we still have such massacres?
Parce que c'est une situation tragique qui nous
Well, I think this is a tragic situation that reminds us that unfortunately there's still gun violence in our country. We have taken measures to reinforce gun control, but we have to do more. We are committed to do more, and we will do more. We need to make sure that Canadians can live safely in their communities, in the streets, and that's what we'll continue working on together.
Est-ce que vous allez participer à ces cérémonies-là?
Will you take part to the ceremonies, and could you file your bill on gun control in the next few weeks? Parliament will be sitting. You could file this week even.
Oui, j'ai l'intention de participer dans ces.
Yes, I intend to participate in the virtual vigils as much as possible, and we will most certainly look into this question and listen to Canadians' will to see more gun control. We will see what the possibilities are to table a bill when the moment is appropriate.
I have every intention of participating in the vigils virtually that I know many Canadians will be wanting to express their solidarity with the families in Nova Scotia who are grieving. And I am very much open to moving forward with our gun control legislation. I think there is always going to be questions about when is the right moment to do that. We are in the middle of a different crisis right now, but with Parliament returning in some fashion over the coming weeks, I think we will look at opportunities to do just that.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.